Good morning.
Good morning. I'm imagining today is going to be quite short.
Yeah, that's totally fine. I know lots of lots of side projects turning into main projects. Distracting on this one for sure.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. So welcome. It's the 2nd of February. It's my birthday month. So the first item on the agenda is me potentially doing a demo of a Redis cluster joining a virtual machine cluster. This is something that Igor has already done for the scalability demo either 1 or 2 weeks ago. So I'm not sure if it's worth my time and effort in doing the same experiment here in this meeting, but I'm open to feedback from both of you.
Would you reckon, Ahmed, is this something which you would, if we just said, go ahead and do this today, would this be something like you'd know the steps for, or was it worth seeing?
Like I didn't see or I didn't watch the thing for scalability, so I wouldn't actually know how this would work. But since I'm like detached from the project, I'm not sure if it's worth the effort also.
I think it's worth the effort. Like I think it's
Okay.
I think it's always interesting to see, and
Okay.
I don't think it hurts to go through these things again.
Let's rock it out. It won't take terribly long anyways.
Awesome.
So let me share my screen. I do have lots of crap on it. Give me a second. Share screen. Michelle, let me know if the font size is kosher.
Make it just a little bigger.
How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so in here is my configuration for our deployment. I got some stuff commented up because I'm testing other things, but the important pieces here is that we are asking Sentinel that we're going to connect to an external master, and we need to enable it because by default it's false. And I'm telling it to join this specific node. And in this particular configuration, we need to do the same for the replica configuration. This is just how this Helm chart works at the moment. Whether or not this could be made easier in the future, I think this is something that we may iterate on, but this is what we're testing out. On the right side, I'm just printing off the logs from the first pod. I have not deployed the pod, which is why we're getting the not found messages. At the bottom, you'll see all the pods that are running. This is just a mock test cluster, so the only thing running is the external DNS. And then just to showcase what things look like now, I got this small little script that's going to go through all of our virtual machines and ask me, what role are you? So we just connected to a node called bench Redis C2VM0. It is currently the primary, and it's got 2 secondaries, which is the other 2 virtual machines that are participating in this cluster. I also connected to the other virtual machine. It is a secondary, or it's a replica, and it's connected to our primary that I noted above. And same for the second VM. So now I will proceed to install a Redis cluster inside of Kubernetes. And if all goes well, it will automatically join this cluster. The important pieces to note here is probably going to be inside of the Redis container when it starts up, because we're going to see that this home chart has a script that runs prior to starting Redis, where it queries itself to determine and ask who does it need to talk to figure out what is a primary node. The reason for this is that during the bootstrap process it has some configurations stored in the config map, and it wants to know whether it needs to be a replica or if it needs to be a primary. If there does not exist any primaries, it's going to bring in a slight configuration difference to ensure that it becomes the primary. That way, in future nodes, when they do the same query, they automatically set themselves as replicas, and they get set up pretty quickly. So this is what I was talking about. It's just a small shell script that runs, and we could see here that it's about to run to a command that says, "Give me the host," and just give me who's the current primary. And you see that we specifically asked that virtual machine. Normally, what would happen is that we would query the service endpoint that this Helm chart creates for us. That's the default behavior of this Helm chart, and this is what we are attempting to modify here. So it queried a virtual machine, so it now knows who to talk to, and we see later on that it connected to that and it performed a sync, which is precisely what we want. And down here, we see that it now knows about all the other virtual machine replicas as well. So the cluster is still coming up, so I'll give that a second longer. I say a second, I'll probably mean a minute. I do not have my external DNS configured properly, which is why we're seeing like crash loop backups, and that's just because the pods do not come online with their appropriate DNS name entries yet. And I think we may see that. I'll probably scroll off the screen. When the pods come online, they still try to talk to themselves, and that DNS name is simply not resolvable yet. One of the things that Igor was working on was trying to reduce how long that takes. And he did find out that the external DNS does have a configurable option that'll update in shorter than a minute. So I think currently we've modified at least one deployment to say, hey, every 10 seconds, update the DNS entries. And I believe that's been rolled out to all of our clusters at this point.
Do you know, Skarbag? I seem to remember Sean might have told us this like some months ago, but I can't recall the answer. You may not either, and that's fine. But I'm wondering, do you know if the rate limiting cluster is one that we're expecting to do much scaling? Like, is this spiky?
So for Redis, I don't presume that we are going to perform any sort of scaling at all. We'll have 3 nodes, or 3 pods rather, and the goal would be that we spread those pods across zones.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have a node affinity rule that ensures that we spread these nodes out across all 3 zones rather than specific nodes. The fruit flies in my house. The reason that we don't want to scale is because anytime a new Redis pod is going to come online, it's going to need to sync all of that data. Less important for rate limiting, more important for the Redis cache, for example, because there's a lot of data that needs to be synchronized across all the replicas. And that synchronization is going to cause a little bit of pressure on the primary as that data gets replicated. And I think Redis caches are heaviest cluster. So I think, adding pressure like this is quite unnecessary. And because of the way GitLab itself works, so GitLab only talks to the primary at any given point in time. It never talks to our replicas. The replicas are simply there for redundancy. If we ever have a failover, GitLab will automatically fail over to the new primary. But otherwise, we don't utilize the replicas for anything at all. I don't know if that's just a limitation in the way that GitLab was designed or built or what have you, but there's no need for the replicas to really exist except for Redis specific redundancy. So the need to scale out Redis, I don't believe it's going to be a thing that we need to worry about. So we'll probably statically configure Redis to say, give me 3 pods, and we'll stick with that for a while until application changes are made where we start leveraging the replicas in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so our Redis cluster is running. We have all 3 nodes or pods in this case running. I don't know why they named it nodes, but if we do another get roles real quick, we now see, so we just queried our primary. We see that our existing VMs are still in play as expected, but we also see all 3 of our pods as replicas now, which is precisely what we want to see. Our virtual machine is a secondary, our third virtual machine is also a secondary. And then lastly, all of our pods, it's hard to see this, I should format this output, but like a Redis node 2, a Redis node 1, a Redis node 0, they're all secondaries, all pointed to our virtual machine as primary. So this is currently a proposal that we have as a PR for the Bitnami Helm chart. We do need to make a little bit of improvements to this PR, which I'm currently working on. But if this gets accepted, this will make the creation of a Redis cluster slightly easier, which I think will benefit us when it comes time to performing the migration. One of the things that we may, or that we will do probably, is modify our configuration such that when these pods come online, they don't accidentally become primaries by accident. And we do this by setting the priority to a value of 0. By default, all replicas have a priority of 100. This is what Redis will use to determine as a weight when it comes time to vote for a new member to be updated as primary in the case of a failover. And I think while we are building these Redis clusters inside of Kubernetes, we want to make sure we avoid setting them as primary, just so that we don't have any surprises when these clusters come online. So that's all I wanted to demo.
Awesome. Thanks for showing up.
I did update our Epic that's tracking all of this work. I'm not going to share my screen for this. I'll just share it verbosely, but currently our goal for this is that we need Redis 6.2 running in Omnibus before we try to start this migration. And also the other item we need is a way to make sure that all the configurations are the same as far as our advertisement of using a fully qualified host name versus IP address. Currently, just due to Redis limitations of 6.2 and below, we were using IP addresses for the configurations. So Redis talks via IP addresses. That's not going to work well inside of a Kubernetes world where if a pod fails, it's going to come up with a dynamically provided IP address. So the Helm chart that Bitnami has created kind of enforces us to utilize host names. So because of that, I'm working on a change to Omnibus such that we modify the Redis deployments to have the ability to leverage host names. That change is currently in review. So we need to upgrade to 6.2, which will be its own change request. And then we'll want to make a configuration change such that we start using host names instead of IP addresses. That is going to be its own change request and will probably require its own bit of testing to make sure that we don't cause problems as we make that configuration change. I don't know how disruptive that is going to be, so we'll be testing that at some point.
Awesome. Did we figure out like what is the kind of, I guess, like timeline and process then for us getting changes into Bitnami? Like how long did it take for the previous one to get merged and then published? I assume it's been published.
It took about 3 weeks from the initial opening of that pull request to get fully reviewed and merged in. and it took about 2 days after getting merged to me seeing it published, but I don't know if it was published the same day and I just didn't notice it because that was near the end of the week. So so I'm trying to finish up this pull request. Igor started it. I just need to make a few improvements. We're going to try to iterate on this because it's not something that's going to be suitable for everyone. So we're going to try to incrementally work on this. One of the downsides to the pull request and the way that the Bitnami chart currently operates is that it kind of assumes that Sentinel and Redis operate on the same virtual machine or same node, which is not the case for Redis cache. We got Sentinel and Redis on separate. We got 6 total nodes operating that Redis cluster effectively. That's the only one that operates that way. I don't know the historical reasons as to why that is, but our Helm chart and the change that we're proposing will not account for that. So we'll have a problem with that specific Redis deployment if we go down that route.
Okay, interesting.
So
is that one
that
that
either we
are wanting to go ahead and actually migrate? So I know there's an epic that went through each of the different okay, yeah, so Redis cache is one that we would hope that we can move into Kubernetes and into Redis cluster in one go.
Yeah, so what I would imagine is either we would probably iterate on this. So my imagination, this is just thinking out loud, is we would get to a point where we migrate at least one of our Redis clusters, say the rate limiting cluster, as is, make sure it works, test it, do this all the way through to production. When it comes time to thinking about Redis cache, we'd either need to make changes to the Bitnami Helm chart, or we could go down the route of compressing that cluster a little bit such that we move Sentinel onto the actual Redis nodes. I don't like that would require a little bit of research into why it was set up that way in the beginning. I'm sure other people know the answer to that. I simply haven't performed the necessary research or looking into the history of that. So, but that's a long ways away. So I'm not going to sit here and look for that anytime soon.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So Igor is working on the upgrade to Redis 6.2 and putting all that work together. I'm trying to finish up and help guide the Bitnami Helm chart change that we want to push through and the omnibus change that we need to get out there as well. One of the other things I'm going to start doing here shortly, we deployed a Redis cluster on virtual machines in pre-prod, but we don't use them yet. I was initially using that as a test bed, but testing was kind of sluggish, so I resorted to creating my own cluster and virtual machine setup for this kind of thing. So I want to reset that cluster. That way we could start pointing the GitLab application running in pre-prod to that cluster. And then we could start testing a full migration and monitoring the application to see how it behaves when we perform said migration.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be super. Because I know Igor's mentioned there are definitely observability gaps as well. So it'd be great to start figuring out what those look like. Nice.
Yep.
Hopefully the Redis upgrade will get unblocked. Maybe this week. If it is this week, it'll be late this week. But hopefully from next week, we'll have the nightly builds running again. And that will be unblocked.
We've still got plenty of work we could do in the meantime. So
awesome. Great. Nice progress. Is there anything that you need any help with?
Not at the moment. I think we still have plenty of work that we are able to accomplish in parallel. And except for the Redis upgrade being blocked, like there's not much we could do about that. So
exactly, yeah, it's definitely inconvenient, but yeah, I'm afraid at the moment there's zero options around that.
yeah. So
Awesome. Great. Nice. Thanks for the update.
cool. Any questions? Otherwise, I'll go to the next item. Okay, so GitLab SSHD. As a reminder, we're in staging. As far as I know, it works. I know the Redis review by Sean and who
Igor.
was the other person?
Igor.
Igor.
The other Igor. Not,
Everyone's just called Igor. That's my default now. Just default to Igor. You're probably right.
Goodness. Recently, they performed some performance testing and staging and showed some pretty good stuff. Like I
Great.
don't really know any details about it. Well, I haven't memorized any details about it, but at this point, the readiness review is kind of ready for review. It's currently assigned to Jarv and Graham, so hopefully they are able to set some time aside to look at that readiness review.
Great.
I restructured the epic just a wee bit to make sure that we understand where we are status-wise.
Awesome.
And so did Sean. So at this point, we in delivery are pretty much ready to start creating the change request for production. And then we just need to wait for the readiness review to complete its review. And
Great.
once everyone finds that acceptable, we could start executing that change request.
Awesome. That sounds great. Awesome.
I don't know if you have anything else that you want to comment on, because I know that you're going to be working on that change request.
I started the change request, but like I still have to fill it with details. So I opened it, in progress, basically.
Excellent.
Awesome. Also, I was going to say, I know Sean proposed running this in EMEA. I would suggest that we either ideally figure out like a way to do this a little bit later in the day so that you're around Scarbeck, because I'm worried about you being a release manager, Ahmad, unless that, like, not that you can't do this, but I'm more, if there's an incident or something to do with release management, you're going to be a bit conflicted. If they are desperate to do this in EMEA, like I know it means we've got a little bit less traffic, gives us a few more hours in the day. It might be that we could ask Jarv if just as he's around as a shadow, just in case he's needed, like in case we need to do some stuff. So see what you think about that. But I think if there's a better time for us, we can certainly propose that.
How much overlap do either of you have with Graham? He would also be a prime person that could help us monitor this as well.
Yeah, a bit. It depends kind of on his day. So he is quite often around for maybe, let me see. He is often around for the first couple of hours of my day. So for you, Ahmad, like probably like he's sometimes around for about 3 hours. It is an evening time for him though. So we'll probably just need to check in with him in advance that is going to work, but certainly that is a possibility. Actually, it's a good point. If he's done the readiness review, maybe that fits quite well. So yeah, we should, if we want to go ahead in EMEA, like let's just figure out who can potentially shadow just in case.
I imagine the process will take a few hours to complete just because of modifying the weights and kind of waiting for traffic flow to change and that kind of thing.
Oh, hang on. What am I talking about? Henry's back next week. So if we do, and I mean, like, let's just assume this week's finished, right? Like there's enough probably going on with the other things that if we pushed it into next week, then you'd have Henry, and then you'd have cover anytime. So yeah. Awesome. Great. Have we got any concerns? Are there any concerns around this change or like how we'll do this change, Ahmad?
Not really. I think like since we did it on staging, it's pretty straightforward.
Great.
So yeah, all good.
Yeah, it's just a more complex configuration change. just a little bit more manual work because we want to roll it out nice and slow and, you know, not break things while we're at it. But like our procedure and staging ensured that things were working prior to shifting traffic onto that deployment. So like the important part that we need to take care of is that when we shift traffic around and off the cluster to make the configuration change, we want to make sure that we don't overload Canary. And because all of that's going to take time, when we start shifting traffic to the cluster with this new configuration, we need to make sure that we've got the capacity, because the HPA will slowly scale things downward when the traffic is off of it. So we want to make sure that HPA catches up over time as well. That way, when traffic goes to it, it doesn't start suffering because not enough pods are taking the traffic, or not enough pods are available to accept the traffic. So, but you know, we know this going into this change request, and you know, this is something that we can't easily test in staging. So it'll just be an incremental rollout, similar to us shifting traffic as we were doing like a migration of a service into Kubernetes.
Awesome. And yeah, I think like, you know, like that's pretty safe. Like as long as we go steady, then we've always detected things pretty quickly in the past and been able to recover. So that should be pretty similar. So.
And one of the items we'll be monitoring, aside from SLIs and such, are pod counts to make sure we don't saturate the HPA for Canary.
Awesome. What level of change request are you putting this in as? Is this a C2?
It's C2, yeah.
Cool. Great.
Like it's straightforward, but it does have the potential to impact people if things go wrong.
Yeah,
pretty badly.
I was thinking as well about following the kind of near miss on the RSA keys. Like I think it may have some extra visibility, not necessarily from our side, but it would be good for that. So when you get to the point you need approval on that, just give me a ping and I can get that sorted out.
Yeah, the hardest part about this is the termination grace period window is just so long. It takes a long time for those pods to quit. It's kind of annoying.
Okay, yeah. That definitely adds weight then to us doing it early in EMEA, right? Because then we've got fewer pods running, right? We won't have scaled up.
That's true, yeah.
So it'll be a quicker process.
And hypothetically, when this change is done, we should have fewer pods in general overall.
Oh, interesting.
Because like the majority of our CPU load is because OpenSSH is having to create a new process for every connection. But that gets completely eliminated with this daemon.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay, that's going to be interesting to see then. Nice. Okay,
it's actually alarming how many pods we run for the Git service right now. I think it's close to 90-ish. Whereas like our web service, we are at our minimum for the web service for the majority of the day.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay, nice. Oh, well, that'll be a super good thing to track then. Like that's sort of, I think the sort of metrics that often are quite invisible. So like, you know, if we do see a drop there, let's shout about that. That's great.
Yeah, that'll be a fun metric to be like, hey, look at this efficiency wouldn't we get out of this?
That could be really cool. Definitely. Awesome. Okay, and we'll probably see knock-on effects from that as well. So awesome, that's great. Nice work. I'm trying to stay pretty hands-off on this one, aside from when I get like direct pings from Sean. But just give me a shout if you need any help, particularly around kind of coordinating on time zones and like if that means we need to like shift any projects or anything like that to make space. So just let me know.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Oh, one thing I haven't written on the agenda, but I was going to mention is, so tomorrow morning is the APAC EMEA demo. So it may, Ahmed, like if you're available, like you're welcome to join, but if you're busy, that's also totally fine. But I was chatting with Graham this morning, and actually one thing he's been thinking about is cluster recreation. So I suggested to him that rather than us talking about it in our one-to-one, we'll do it in the APAC demo, even if it's just the two of us. Graham's just been thinking kind of theoretically about what might be involved, which I think might be a great like recording for us to have as we start looking into this stuff. So if you have any comments, questions, then feel free to leave them and we'll try and answer. Related to that, so there's kind of two things, I guess, about cluster recreation. One is that it's just generally would be a great idea if we knew our process for doing it and had an automated way. But then on a more practical thing, for expanding our IP range, we're going to need to be able to do this. So I have also got an issue I just opened. I'll link it after this. I've asked Jakob to try and figure out at what point are we going to run out of IP addresses based on scaling, so that we can sort of hopefully avoid having to scramble on this stuff, but we can get it prioritized like well ahead of when we're going to need it.
I bet you we could probably roll, since we're capturing, are we capturing this? If we aren't capturing this, we probably could, because we know how many nodes we run. We could probably create a saturation metric for this kind of thing.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
And insert that into what's that thing that Andrew created that alerts us about saturation prediction?
Interesting. Tamland.
Yes, Tameland.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a great idea. That's a good idea, actually. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So yeah, so I will get the recording up tomorrow on this stuff. But say if there anything, if you have any ideas you'd like to kind of hear Graham talk about, or you know, if you want to put something in here or ask questions, whatever, feel free to stick them in the agenda. We'll go through as much as we can. The idea, of course, is we'll come out and it'll be a epic and a proposal. We can figure it out, but it's often a good way to just get a lot of information in one go.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Is there anything else that we want to converse about? Is there anything fun anyone's learned about Kubernetes the past week or two that they would like to share?
One thing I suppose that might be, I haven't learned about it, but probably we need to kind of find a way to learn about it is, so we've got a squad, a reliability squad focused on the breaking GKE upgrade coming in March. I'm going to actually mention to them that they may want to use the demos. I know there's a few bits that they won't be so familiar with or may want to update us on. So I'll mention if they want to drop in on demos, they can. But I wonder as well, like whether we maybe try and figure out this year, like how we can make this stuff less manual. I know breaking changes are hard, but like our process at the moment seems to rely on Graham opening an issue and us kind of panicking a bit and trying to get it prioritized, which is probably not the best way we could do it. So like if we've got ideas for that, that'd be fun.
Is there any harm in going ahead and bringing I know this meeting is kind of geared towards migrating things into Kubernetes, but could we use this same time to have those discussions with that squad?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I'll certainly invite them in, because I think there's some stuff which we will definitely want to pair on. Like we'll hold the knowledge basically. It'd be great to pass that over. We can do that as a pair. So yeah, I'll get them invited over.
Okay. Alrighty. Well, if there's nothing else, you all have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. You too. See you soon.
Bye.